We're going to look at a few questions that you can ask evolutionists. And we're actually in a spiritual battle, and evolution is the basis for the other side. And so, Jesus, quite often, with people that he didn't agree with, would ask them questions and would answer questions with questions. And so, with evolution, it has big problems, but they're taught that it's scientific fact. And so we're going to look at evolution a little bit here and just some things that you can ask questions of people who believe in evolution. One big question that you can start with is, how did life originate? Evolutionist Professor Paul Davies admitted nobody knows how a mixture of lifeless chemicals spontaneously organize themselves into the first living cell. Andrew Knoll, professor of biology, Harvard, said, "We don't really know how life originated on this planet. A minimal small cell needs several hundred proteins. Even if every atom in the universe were an experiment with all the correct amino acids present for every possible molecule vibration in the supposed evolutionary age of the universe, not even one average-sized functional protein would form. So how did life with hundreds of proteins originate by chemistry without intelligent design? So not even one would form is what what they're saying, and I think that's true. If every atom was one, it just doesn't happen. Then you need all these proteins to come together to make a living thing, and that's going to be a bigger problem. How did the DNA code originate? The code is a sophisticated language system with letters and words where the meaning of the words is unrelated to the chemical properties of the letters. Just as the information on this page is not a product of the chemical properties of the ink or pixels on a screen, what other coding system has existed without intelligent design? How did DNA coding system arise without it being created? So you need DNA, but you need RNA and you need ATP too. And the DNA, well, smaller, less sophisticated things will not need that many, but humans have 3.2 billion. We'll talk about it in a little bit. Accidental, how could mutations, accidental copying mistakes, DNA letters exchanged, deleted and added, gene duplicated, chromosome inversion, etc., create the human volumes of information in DNA of living things. How could such errors create 3 billion letters of DNA information to change a microbe into a microbiologist? Mutations are known for their destructive effects, including over 1,000 human diseases such as hemophilia. Rarely are they ever helpful, but now how can scrambling existing DNA information create new biochemical pathways or nanomachines with many components to make goo to you evolution possible? And mutations just are not good. And they're one of their gods, so of course they're good, and they think that evolution's a fact. It's a scientifically proven fact. And like, how do you got that? Well, go talk to a scientist. Well, I don't want to talk to those scientists who believe it to be a scientific fact. Why is natural selection a principle recognized by creationists taught as evolution, as if it explains the origin and diversity of life. Actually, creationists came up with it first. By definition, it is a selective process, selecting from already existing information. So, if not a creative it is not a creative process. It might explain the survival of the fittest, why certain genes benefit the creature more in certain environments, but not the arrival of the fittest, where the genes and creatures came from in the first place. The death of individuals not adapted to the environment and the survival of those who are suited does not explain the origin of traits that an organism is adapted to an environment. Example, how do minor back and forth variation in finch beaks explain the origin of beaks or finches? How does natural selection explain good to you evolution? So it's basically a god. It's just it's nature. It's kind of like a quality control engineer. They look at stuff that's done already, and sometimes it's the survival of the fittest, sometimes it's survival of the luckiest, and even uh, if if they do better in another environment, it doesn't mean that they're going to change into anything else. How did biochemical pathways, which involve multiple enzymes working together in sequence, originate? Every pathway in nanomachine requires multiple protein enzyme components to work. How did lucky accidents create even one of the components, let alone 10 or 20 or 30 at the same time, often in a necessary program sequence? Evolutionary biochemist Franklin Harold wrote, "We must concede that there are presently no detailed accounts of evolution of any biochemical or cellular system, only a variety of wishful speculation." So each cell has these little nano machines inside that do all the work. And actually, we know now they get their information from the DNA and tells them what to do. And so that's information where someone gives, like the cell, I mean, the DNA gives the information to these machines and they do it. That is a sophisticated level of information, and it only comes from intelligence. DNA only comes from intelligence. This information in DNA only comes from intelligence. Living things look like they were designed, so how do evolutionists know they were not designed? Richard Dawkins wrote, "Biology is the study of complicated things that have the appearance of having been designed with a purpose." And Frank Crick, the co-discoverer of the double helix structure of DNA, wrote, "Biologists must constantly keep in mind that what they see was not designed, but rather evolved." The problem for evolutionists is that living things show too much design. Who objects when an archaeologist says that pottery points to human design, yet if someone attributes design to in living things to a designer, that is not acceptable. Why should science be restricted to natural causes? Actually, when they don't have an open mind and are not open to new ideas in science, this means they're not doing science. All they are doing is trying to validate the ancient myth that Darwin claimed he had science for, but he didn't have science for either, and he promised in his next book he'd fill in the gaps, but he never did. And he talks about the origin of species. He doesn't explain the origin of species. Did multicellular life originate? How did multicell life originate? How did cells adapt to individual survival, learn to cooperate and specialize, including undergoing programmed cell death to create complex plants, and animals. And so this is a big problem. And some of them today say, oh, we got single cells going together in group. It's a whole different kind of cell when it gets in there. And they have to uh, reproduce all as an organism. And so it's just never going to happen. A single cell's never going to be there, and it's not going to evolve into a multicellular life. How did sex originate? Asexual reproduction gives us up to twice as much reproductive success, fitness for the same results as sexual reproduction. So how could the latter ever gain enough advantage to be selected? That's a big problem. And how could mere physics and chemistry invent the complementary apparatuses needed at the same time? Non-intelligent process cannot plan for the future coordination of male and female organs. So sex is a big problem for evolutionists. They should be remained asexual. There's no reason for them to become sexual. And it did, but that was by the plan of God. Why are the expected countless millions of transitional fossils missing? Darwin noted that the problem, and it still remains. The evolutionary family trees in textbooks are based on imagination, not fossil evidence. Famous Harvard paleontologist and evolutionist Stephen Jay Gould wrote, "The extreme rarity of transitional forms in the fossil record persists as a trade secret of paleontology." Other evolutionists, fossil experts also acknowledge the problem. They don't have the type of family tree um, and transitional fossils that Darwin expected. He expected to see a fish slowly growing arms in the next generation and slowly going the same uh, type or species changing. And now today they say, oh, we see something that looks like a fish that has feet. That proves it. No, he wanted a little change, and they don't have this transitional fame change that Darwin said we would find, but we didn't find it. All we see basically is stasis. How do living fossils remain unchanged over supposed hundreds of millions of years? If evolution has changed worms into human in the same time frame, Professor Gould wrote, the maintenance of stability within species must be considered a major evolutionary problem. So they got like all the way back to the beginning, the Cambrian explosion. Um, all those animals are still around and they haven't changed. Not all of them, some of them have. And so uh, then you show that to some evolutionists and they say, well, that's the way evolution works. No, that's not how evolution works. If everybody's adapting all the time, and if they haven't changed, then it's not validating evolution. How did blind chemistry create mind, intelligence, meaning, altruism, and morality? If everything evolved and we invented God as per evolutionary teaching, what purpose or meaning is there to human life? Should students be learning nihilism, life is meaningless, in science class? Well, we are programmed to have meaning and purpose in our life. And for some reason, they're saying, oh, science has proved you that's a fallacy. No, it's not. It's true. And how did thinking come? And how did consciousness come? And just so many things that blind chemistry cannot explain. Why is evolutionary just so storytelling tolerated? Evolutionists often use flexible fair storytelling to explain observations contrary to the evolutionary theory. NAS USA member Dr. Philip Skell wrote, Darwinian expectations for such things are often too supple. Natural selection makes humans self-centered and aggressive, except when it makes them altruistic and peaceable. Or natural selection produces virile men who eagerly spread their seed, except when it prefers men who are faithful protectors and providers. When an explanation is so subtle that it can't explain any behavior, it is difficult to test it experimentally, much less use it as a catalyst for scientific discovery. And that's a big problem. I'll tell you, evolution is not science, it is a worldview. And it's a world review that is wrong. And we're trying to show that with these questions now. What are the specific breakthroughs due to evolution? Dr. Mark Kisner, chair of the Department of Systems Biology, Harvard Medical School, stated, in fact, over the last 100 years, almost all of biology has proceeded independent of evolution, except evolutionary biology itself. Molecular biology, biochemistry, physiology have not taken evolution into account at all. And I don't think any science should take it into account at all. Dr. Schell wrote, "It is our knowledge of how these organisms actually operate, not speciation speculation about how they have arisen millions of years ago. This is essential to doctors, veterinarians, and farmers. Evolution basically hinders medical discovery, and then why do science schools and universities teach evolution so dogmatically, stealing time from experimental biology that so benefits humankind? They shouldn't teach it in school, and we'll talk about it. And it should be taught in private schools. If Christianity has to be taught in private schools, then evolution should be taught in private schools. Science involves experimenting to figure out how things work, how they operate. Why is evolution a theory about history taught as if it's the same as operational science? You cannot do experiments or even observe what happened in the past. Ask if evolution has been observed. Richard Dawkins said, evolution has been observed, it's just that it hasn't been observed while it's happening. So it's a big problem. And it's a historical thing. You need historical science. You can't use operation science. And somebody came up with the idea, oh, the present is key to the past. And so we see micro mutations now. That means there was a million of them in the past. Well, mutations are bad, and they thought more than one a generation would be catastrophic. Then we found out 200 to 300 a generation, and it's a huge problem for everything related to evolution. Why is a fundamentally religious idea a dogmatic belief system that fails to explain the evidence taught in science class? Karl Popper, the famous philosopher of science, said, Darwinism is not a testable scientific theory, but a metaphysical religious research program. Michael Ruse, evolutionist scientist, philosopher, admitted evolution is a religion. This was true of evolution in the beginning, and it's true of evolution still today. If you can't teach religion in science classes, why is evolution taught? It's a big problem, and it's really a war. And it's war against the forces of darkness that we're involved in. We got to try to teach people, like I'm doing, like all these creation groups are doing, and try to show that they're wrong and that the Bible is true and that Jesus is real and he died on the cross for our sins and paid the price so we could trust him for our salvation. He rose from the dead to conquer death. And that's what we need to do. We're in a battle, and they just do nothing but mock us, and we got to keep fighting back no matter what.